Today's going to be a fun video, a fun refurbish for me because it's the first table that my wife and I bought together over 20 years ago. This table has traveled the world. It was the first table that my daughter ate food out of a jar, her first big girl food at, sitting in her little high chair. So it brings back a lot of memories. It's one of those things about what I do that makes me want to share it with you guys. It's just, some pieces of furniture have memories and you don't want to get rid of them. You don't want to buy some faux wood thing at the big box store. You want to keep what you had. This is really solid, beautiful oak, and just bring it back to life. And sometimes you just need to know how. So this is another one of those videos. I used our Green EZ stripper to bring it back down to the wood, sanded it a little bit, and now we're going to use our Wise Hemp Seed Oil over raw wood in this video. We have this is part 2. We have a part 1 that's over stained wood, and I'll tag it in this video so you can watch that in case you're staining a piece and you want to also use our hemp seed oil. So if this is something you're interested in, stay tuned here on Wise Paint Party. All right, so as always, the first things first. What are you gonna need? So you're gonna need some of our hemp seed oil, right? And then I have a 1.5 inch Wise premium brush, and this is the one I use for the part 1 over the stained top. And all I've done is I put it in a Ziploc bag. It stayed nice and moist. So as long as you put it in a Ziploc bag and squeeze all the air out of it and zip it up real good, this is how you take care of your brushes when you're using hemp seed oil. There's no real reason to wash it. I wouldn't convert a oil brush to a water-based brush, so I would definitely keep these specific to the salves or the hemp seed oil and not crisscross them over, because you could probably clean them, but it would be a little bit difficult to be 100% sure that there's still no oils in here. So this is how I do it. And then of course, blue shop towels and a lint-free microfiber cloth for later. So that's what you're gonna need. So the very first step that we're gonna take is we're gonna pour some hemp seed oil over this table. And as you can see, I have stripped it down to the bare wood. I have sanded it smooth, and now it's ready to have something done to it. Now, how hemp seed oil works, if you're new to it, is it's going to absorb into the fibers of the wood and basically take up all the room that there is for the fibers to absorb anything. So it's gonna absorb in, take up all the room, seal, protect the wood. So basically what that's gonna mean is if I pour something else over the top of that, there's no more room left for anything else, like something you spill or anything to go into the fibers. It's just gonna sit on top of the fibers. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pour the hemp oil in there until it's not able to absorb anymore. And that's where you get the thirsty from. If you've ever heard that when talking with hemp seed oil, the wood looks very thirsty, like it looks dry. And we're gonna add hemp seed oil to it until it no longer looks thirsty. And with raw wood, it might take 1 or 2 or possibly 3 applications, depending on the type of wood that you're using. So our first application is just gonna be as simple as pouring it on, brushing it even, and then leaving it alone. So that's what we're gonna start off with. So I'm gonna get my brush out, and again, I have my 1.5 inch Wise premium brush, and it's still good and wet from the last time. It's been probably a month since I used it last, and it's good and wet and still ready to use. And I can even probably put a little on there. You can see it change because it's still wet from inside the bag. The big thing is just making sure it's airtight and zipped up tight as can be. So with the hemp seed oil, we're just gonna pour this on and brush it. You could use your hands. That's another method I've seen people do, just kind of rub it in. Especially with hemp seed oil, it's actually really great for your skin. So, but I like to use a brush just to make sure it's perfectly even. So you're gonna watch it change as I pour this right on here. Now I'm gonna watch out. I have a leaf, so I'm gonna make sure I don't pour it down into the crack and drip all over the floor. and something like that. I mean, you don't have to be too specific, knowing you're gonna brush it. And then we're just gonna brush it down into the fibers. And you can already see that golden oak starting to come back out from, geez, this thing's probably 30 years old. We got it 20 something years ago. So you can already see, because it's raw wood, it's really absorbing down into the wood. And you know, more than likely, you're probably gonna need to do 2 or 3 applications of this over raw wood, because there's a lot of room for the hemp seed oil to soak down into. Whereas a raw wood already has the stain absorbed into it, and there's not a lot of room left for hemp seed oil to soak into. So again, we're just brushing this on and getting a nice even coat all the way throughout. There's no real, all you have to do it this way, you're just getting it on. And this wood is going to be very, very thirsty because it's just dry. There's no moisture left in it, especially I've had it inside in the shop, and I have a dehumidifier in here, so it's really been pulling any moisture that it did have from when I cleaned it out of it. So now it's really going to be wanting to have something to just revitalize the wood a little bit. And that's what this, obviously you can see what this hemp oil is doing. It looks amazing, really bringing it back to life. But ultimately what we're trying to do with the hemp seed oil as a top coat, as a protectant, is we're trying to fill the fibers with hemp seed oil enough that nothing else can penetrate it. And that's why hemp seed oil is a great protectant for wood, why a lot of woodworkers use it, because it allows you to keep the wood the way the wood was originally supposed to look, but also have it be very protected. So I could spill something on this and not have to worry about anything happening to the wood, because there's nowhere for the spill to go. Now, as you can see, this is absorbing right down into the wood, because it doesn't have like a layer of just oil over the top, because it's all going down in, and that's exactly what we're looking for. I'm gonna brush around the edges here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna brush this on. I'm gonna make sure I have one good solid coat, so I'm gonna come over here and make sure it looks at least a little bit wet. With it being this raw wood like this, it's probably not gonna have a thin coat all the way across, but at least look like it's a little bit wet. And then we're gonna leave it for about a half hour. And then I'm gonna come back in a half hour and see if there's any spots that still look wet, or if there's any spots that still look really dry. And then we'll decide from there what we need to do next. Now the next step would be, obviously for raw wood, is to do another coat, because it's really not likely, unless this is a veneer, a really thin veneer wood top, that one coat is gonna be enough. And you'll know, because you're gonna come back in a half hour, and if it looks dry or thirsty again, you know you're gonna need to add more. So we're just gonna make sure it's nice and even all the way across. And even looking at this, if I get down where the light reflects, is where you can kind of see what spots are still wet and what spots are soaked it right in and got really dry really fast. And those are the spots you're gonna wanna just go over. I'm just gonna evenly distribute out the hemp seed oil across the table, all the way across. And then I'm gonna leave it for about a half hour. And again, I'm gonna come back, we're gonna take a look at it, and we'll see together what this is gonna look like. And I'll probably do a little zoom in shot so you can kind of see what this looks like wet. I know probably from the angle you guys have, it's a little bit difficult. But we're just gonna brush this across, nice, even, wet look to it, to ensure every area is getting an equal amount of hemp seed oil. Just like that. I'm gonna go around the edge, make sure I don't have any drips, especially if you're doing a table with a hard edge. You just kind of want to make sure you're not dripping all over the place. I already see some on my floor down there. I'm gonna get here in a second. All right, there we go. So a dramatic difference, right? So this is only one coat, and you can see how it absorbed right in. And now we're gonna wait that 30 minutes. And again, I'm gonna come down here real quick and do a little video so you can see what it looks like wet. But I'm gonna come back in 30 minutes and also show you what that looks like so you can kind of see, okay, raw wood, what is it gonna do if I add hemp seed oil to it? It's gonna look like this right away. It's gonna look like this 30 minutes from there. And then what we're gonna need to do if it still looks thirsty after this first application. All right, so it's been about 30, 40 minutes, and as expected with this thick wood, raw wood, the hemp oil is gone. It's completely absorbed down into the wood. There really isn't any wet spots. It feels kind of moist and you can feel the oil to your touch, but there is nothing to wipe away. And this is where you know, okay, I'm gonna need to do a second coat. So again, we're 30, 40 minutes later, we've come back, we look, and it looks dry. You don't see any shiny wet spots or anything like that. That's when you're like, okay, coat number 2 needs to happen. Now, if I came back and it was all completely still wet, that's when you can start to wipe back and kind of go on to the next steps, which I'll go over. But since this is raw wood, you can likely expect you're gonna need to do at least 2 coats, especially if it's not veneer. If it's a veneer, a thin wood veneer, it might be 1 coat. I would highly expect still 2 if it's just raw wood. But with something like this, it's a good 1.5 inch thick oak. So it's definitely gonna take 2, maybe 3 coats, depending on how it looks. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through that same process. I'm not gonna wipe any of the excess back because we're just gonna add more anyway, since we're doing it over raw wood. So I'm just gonna go through that same exact process one more time. And again, we're just gonna pour this on, and then we're gonna brush it in. And it's gonna be the same process, so I'm probably gonna fast forward through this real quick and get to the next step for you guys. But I just wanted to show you that it really does absorb into the wood. It is thirsty. It needs to drink that oil into its fibers to really solidify it as a protectant and stop anything else from absorbing down into it. So we're gonna do the second coat. We're gonna brush it on, and we're gonna make sure it's good and wet all the way across, just like we did the first coat, until this just stops altogether. All right, and there you have it. You have your second coat. And again, just doing a really nicely even coat. We're gonna leave it for another 30 to 40 minutes. And then we're gonna come back and wipe back any excess that's there, if that's where we think we need to go with it, or add another coat, depending on what it looks like. So that's it for now. All right, so as you saw in the little close-up video, you can see how much more wet it looked directly after brushing it on the second coat than it did the first coat. And as you can probably tell from this process, the main thing that's going to happen is the hemp oil is going to absorb into the fibers and take up all the room that there is to take. So that way it's protected, sealed, and nothing else is going to get into your wood, right? So now it's been a little over 40 minutes and you can see there's no wet left. There's a couple of spots here or there. So it's continuing to absorb into this wood. This is a very thick oak. It's probably 1.5 inches. So it just depends on the kind of wood you're using, whether it's veneer or not, and how many layers or coats of hemp seed oil you're going to need to use. I'm going to go ahead and do the third coat. I feel like based on just looking around, there's a couple of spots that look thirsty. And what I mean by that is if I look down at an angle with the light shining on it, it just has still a little bit of that dry look. Whereas you can see it's that beautiful golden color mostly throughout, but there's a couple of spots where I just feel like I want to give it just a little bit more. So I'm going to do a third coat for this. Now, let's see. How do you decide, right? Like, how do you know if it's done enough? And I guess the big thing is when you're taking a look across the table, right? After that 40 minutes, and if there's pooling and stuff coming up everywhere, you know you're pretty well done. But if you're using a thicker wood like this, you really just want to look and see, does it look even all the way across? Does it have that, for this is, that golden look all the way across? And for me, I saw a couple of dry spots that I know I just want to ensure, because the dry spots are going to look just a hair lighter, obviously. And I want to get those to look exactly like the rest. So that's kind of how you'll know. You just kind of take a step back, look at it, and decide, does it look even all the way across? Does it look not necessarily wet, but not dry anymore? Does it have a revitalized look to the wood? And you definitely could tell, from the beginning of the video where it was really white and dry to now this beautiful golden, trying to think of the right word, like saturated in hemp oil. It's kind of like putting lotion on wood kind of thing. So this is what we've got, but I just feel like one more coat is going to do the best. So I'm not going to bore you with painting on another coat. I'll probably zip through this again and then show you what it looks like after I painted it on, so you can see how much more wet it looked from the first to the second and now to the third. And then I wanted to plug one other thing that has come out since the first video, the video over the stained wood. We now have a furniture tonic that is also great for this application. We have unscented, but we also have scents like we do our furniture salves. And I'll do a future video using this stuff on other wood materials, also some painted stuff. But I just wanted to show you guys this in case you're just catching this video. I just got this stuff in, already played with it quite a bit, love it, used it on some shelves for our house. It's really great stuff. And you can also use that in lieu of our hemp seed oil if you wanted something that had a scent to it. But for now, I'm just going to do a third coat. Again, I'm not going to bore you with a third coat. It's going to be the same process. You're going to paint it on. I'm going to do another in-close video to show you what it looks like, so you can kind of see how much more wet it looks right after. Because that's the big thing. I wanted to show those close-up videos is you paint it on that first coat, it's like a sponge right down into the wood. And then you paint it on the second coat and then it absorbed a little bit, right? And then the third coat you're going to paint it on, and right directly after, it's probably still going to be sitting there. You're not going to have anywhere to go. And that's the whole idea to this. We're putting enough hemp seed oil into the fibers of the wood that it's going to seal and protect it and not let anything else get down in there. And that's the whole idea of this, using our hemp seed oil over raw wood. I'm going to go ahead and do this, fast forward through, do a quick little in close shot, and then we should be on to the next step after that. All right, so as you saw in the in-close video, you could see it was a lot, just looked like it wasn't really absorbing into it. So I gave it the 40 minutes. It's been actually about an hour. Some has dried and some has absorbed and some is left over. So now we're gonna take our shop towel and we're just gonna wipe back any excess that's still sitting on the surface. You do not wanna leave this overnight because those spots where the excess is will get sticky and gross, and it'll be more like a top coat on top of the wood instead of within the wood. So you wanna make sure after that 40 minutes, half hour, that you're coming back and you're wiping back the excess. And there's quite a bit this third coat. You can see that if I would have done this step after the first or second, I probably wouldn't have gotten anything off because it was all into the wood. That's kind of how I know we're ready, we're done. So I'm just gonna wipe back all the excess that I have on this thing. Go all the way around my table, pull it all back, and then the waiting begins. And so what you're gonna wanna do is, as you did with the stained wood, you're gonna give it a good 3 to 4 days to just sit and dry. And then in those 3 days, it'll get an opportunity just to kind of set and dry enough where you can tell, hey, this spot over here didn't get enough and I need to add more and go through the steps. Or if it looks beautiful and even like we have here, then you can just stop. And after those 3 days, you're good to go to put it into use. Now, you want to do light use because it will take, your usual 30 days to actually fully cure and fully give those protective qualities to the wood. So I wouldn't, beat it up too bad for those first 30 days. But that's all there's going to be to it. It turned out really, really good. I'm very happy. It's going to dry and be this beautiful matte finish as well. And you're going to know it's protected. It's going to look, like the wood's supposed to look. There's no sheen to it. It's just a wood top. So another great reason to go ahead and use hemp seed oil over raw wood. All right, so it's been that 3 days, and as you can see, it's not quite as wet looking. It has dried up a little bit, so the color that you're gonna get from the wood is actually what the wood looks like. So it's not that, dry white color, and it's not that deep orangey color that we had when we initially put on the hemp seed oil, because it is going to dry a little bit. So after those 3 days, you're gonna go through and you're just gonna buff it out. Throughout the last 3 days, I've just come and checked to make sure there wasn't any pooled spots, because again, you don't want to have any pooling of spots because it'll dry as like a top coat on top of the wood instead of in the wood. So you definitely want to come back and just keep an eye on it over those 3 days and just see how it looks. But right now it's pretty much dry. There's a couple of spots where I'm still having a little hemp seed oil coming up, and that's what we're going to do. We're just going to buff that out. And then over the next couple of days, I'll probably do the same thing, but usually that 3 day window is where you kind of know where I've done enough, instead of having a spot where there's something where it's still super dry and I need to add more. This is pretty much where you're gonna know you've done enough that it still, has a little bit coming to the surface. You're having to buff it out, and that way it's completely penetrated. It's sealing that wood in and gonna be very protective of anything you might spill on it. So you get a lint-free microfiber cloth and you're just gonna kind of buff it out. Just go over the top and buff it out. And this will be kind of your last step for this. You're definitely gonna wanna keep an eye on it again for a few more days and just ensure if there's any other spots that want to come up, because again, it's only gonna be able to absorb so much of the hemp seed oil. So you might still have stuff in a couple spots here or there, maybe where a knot is or something where it's not as able to absorb the hemp seed oil, where it's going to push it out a little bit. We're just going to buff it out And that's going to be all there is to it. And then in about 30 days, it'll be completely cured and ready for that high traffic use. Between those 30 days, you want to just kind of take it easy and make sure you're not spilling like grape soda on this thing. But after that, I'd say you'd be pretty safe to, let the kids go to town, eating and drinking. I know this is going to be my daughter's little kind of breakfast nook table, and I'm not too worried about anything with her after I've done this to it. So I'll probably do another little in-close video so you can see. I'll put it up here somewhere, and just that way you can see just that difference from the very first video all the way through. We put hemp oil on 3 times, we wiped it off, we waited, and it's gone from that white, dry oak to the really bright orange from when we did the applications to now this nice subtle golden oak that it is. And that's what hemp seed oil will do for you. It makes it really easy to top coat and protect and keep the wood exactly as it is. And there you have it, how to use our hemp seed oil over raw wood. Again, this is a second part of our 2-part series on how to use hemp seed oil over wood, whether it's raw or stained wood, which is part 1. I'll ensure I put the link down below for that. And if you're looking for any of our Wise All paint products, be sure to find your local retailer near you. I'll have that link down below as well. And as always, happy painting.